You see one sibling constantly. She dominates social media feeds, news briefings, and television broadcasts, pushing a $1 million bounty. 31 days brought half a dozen clips of televised heartbreak. Meanwhile, the second sibling remains completely out of sight. 22 straight days have passed without a peep. She skips media briefings, avoids lenses, and refuses to plead publicly. Meanwhile, her spouse, the final individual to witness the matriarch, breathing, spent over 40 days keeping quiet about his car, being impounded by detectives for official scrutiny. A missing matriarch divides two siblings. Yet a 30-year federal agent found the quiet sister's behavior most glaring after analyzing the vocal siblings' extensive broadcast history. Tonight's focus centers on this jarring difference. We will explore 7 fully corroborated, officially documented facts surrounding Nancy Guthrie's vanishing. This excludes web rumors or wild internet guesswork. Federal bureaus, intelligence veterans, and science professionals back these 7 points. Alongside the local sheriff's glaringly inconsistent remarks delivered exactly 14 days apart during different briefings. A single distinct line links these 7 points straight back to Annie Guthrie and her spouse, Tomaso Chioni, the driver who transported Nancy before she disappeared, holding the title of the ultimate verified witness to her life. Authorities reportedly kept this man's ride impounded for more than 30 days, even as the chief officer falsely assured reporters that the inspection was finished and the property relinquished. Savannah Guthrie holds all this knowledge. It has been clear to her since dawn broke on February 1st, 2026. That precise awareness shaded her every recording, guided her meticulously crafted announcements, and heavily influenced her entire digital footprint. She realizes who chauffeured her mom. She understands exactly what federal teams uncovered during 2 separate raids on her siblings' property over 4 days. She is aware the automobile remained impounded. She heard the behavioral expert's widespread broadcast, yet she managed to face the lens half a dozen times without ever mentioning these critical elements. Her tight lips, combined with Annie's quietness, create the very bedrock for the rest of tonight's revelations. We must first understand Nancy Guthrie, the person, rather than the news story. This 84-year-old woman resides independently within a masonry residence nestled beneath the Catalina slopes. It is a tranquil, affluent community tucked away in northern Tucson, Arizona. Locals here share a tight bond and greet everyone familiarly. Driveways clear out early, and the evening breeze usually dominates the soundscape. Nancy herself possesses profound religious devotion and an incredibly clever mind. Relatives describe her chuckle as echoing through the house. She parented her kids in an environment that strictly enforced weekly worship services. Evening meals were treated as sacred gatherings. Her movement is heavily restricted, and she relies on a heart-regulating implant. Skipping her strictly regimented, everyday pharmaceuticals guarantees severe, rapidly worsening health complications. She also birthed the Today Show's renowned co-host, Savannah Guthrie, a prominent figure greeting countless households across the nation, right at daybreak. Detectives eventually suspected her child's high-profile celebrity status was no coincidence in the decision to strike this particular home. It might be the primary motive. On Saturday, January 31st, 2026, Nancy passed her night at Annie's place, roughly 4 miles from her own foothills property. Externally, it mirrored a standard relative gathering. She used a paid transport service to get there but skipped it going back. Precisely at 9:48 at night, local authorities verify Tomaso Chioni, Savannah's sibling spouse, rolls up to Nancy's property. He idles while she enters the structure, and the automated barrier closes tight at 9:50 sharp. The car's beams wash over the silent pavement before vanishing into the shadows, leaving Nancy Guthrie entirely solitary within her stone-built walls. Nobody can officially prove she survived past that specific recorded second. From this juncture, official scrutiny zones right in on Tomaso Chioni. Detectives targeted him due to solid, provable facts, idling there at 9:50 at night. Tommaso possessed a dangerous mental blueprint. He thoroughly understood the building's internal floor plan. Frequent visits gave him deep familiarity with the property. He memorized where every single surveillance lens pointed. He was fully conscious of Nancy's physical struggles, He understood her cardiovascular implant and tracked her routine pill regimen. Furthermore, he correctly estimated the exact time frame that would lapse before another person tried reaching out to her. Possessing such details doesn't equal a crime. Everyone in Nancy's inner circle grasped similar fragments of her lifestyle. Closeness breeds awareness. Yet in any major inquiry, whether handled by local deputies or elite national law enforcement squads, investigators immediately scrutinize the final individual caught alongside the target. They are always priority number one. Here, that focal point happens to be Tomaso Chioni. That basic truth remained constant through more than 40 days of intensive government probing. 4 hours slip by. The surrounding block stays pitch black. Suddenly, during the pre-dawn stretch of February 1st, 2026, Nancy's entry lens detects a shift in the shadows. Someone breaches the visual field. Dark facial hair, medium frame. Detectives eventually estimated him between 5'9" and 5'10". He toted a 25-liter Ozark Trail rucksack tightly strapped, hands fully covered. Top federal official Cash Patel openly acknowledged the clip's contents. The intruder carried a weapon. He navigates the gloom, showing calculated, steady composure, something psychological experts later deemed entirely different from random, spur-of-the-moment criminality. He avoids glancing toward the lens like a regular burglar might, nor does he pause near the threshold like a person experiencing the layout for the first time. He steps up and rips the device offline. Local police officially stated that Nancy's front-facing security monitor suffered deliberate sabotage and went dead before sunrise. Authorities eventually hired private digital specialists to tackle the brutal process of salvaging the recording, and despite massive hurdles, they miraculously pulled it off. His movements show he knew the layout perfectly, and insider details shared by CNN from lead detectives actually back this up. This disguised person scoped out Nancy Guthrie's place on at least one previous trip. Older security clips caught this exact guy walking that identical route on another day, just minus the bag. He wasn't winging it. This whole thing was highly calculated, involving a clear scouting run well before the evening of January 31st. Let me share the technical evidence that proves how heavily orchestrated this was. Think about the Ring doorbells throughout that community, lenses strapped to gates, sheds, and patio systems that normally would capture a complete picture of everything happening around those homes all evening long. Just died. Locals reviewed their recordings on February 1st's sunrise, only to discover identical blank screens plaguing several different houses. Complete static. A massive blackout window perfectly matching the exact time frame she vanished. Once detectives canvassed the street shortly afterward, they posed a very specific question to everyone living nearby. Did your Wi-Fi drop out during the evening of January 31st? Several folks said yes. Tech specialists speaking with NBC News laid it out plainly, forcing a blackout that massive across several yards, passing through solid barriers and deep into backyards. Absolutely demands a military-grade signal jammer. Hardware like that demands deep tech skills, serious forward thinking, and careful purchasing. It was totally orchestrated. The suspect charted out the local surveillance grid ahead of January 31st and surgically knocked it out. The perpetrator didn't simply grab Nancy Guthrie. They crafted a master plan to abduct her. Welcome to the channel. This deep dive is our weekly bread and butter. We push beyond standard police briefings and dig straight into the hard data. We tackle mysteries where the public narrative totally clashes with the actual crime scene clues. Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell, because what we uncover in the following segments, especially the digital goldmine federal agents grabbed from Annie and Tommaso's place on the evening of February 7th, completely flips this investigation upside down. Stay tuned. Around 2:30 a.m. on February 1st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker pinged her cell phone for the final time. Fox News Digital verified that specific data point by comparing it directly with the Puma County Sheriff's official logs. Her medical implant stopped transmitting before dawn, and detectives officially recorded the drop-off. That moment locked into a precise chronicle that triggered a massive federal response before the sun even came up. Fast forward to late Sunday morning, February 1st. Nancy completely failed to tune in to her regular virtual church broadcast, something she absolutely never skipped. a fellow congregant reached out to her loved ones. Family members headed over near 11 a.m., scouring both the interior and the exterior yards. She was just gone, right around midday. Relatives dialed 911, and arriving officers immediately noticed her everyday possessions. Her mobile device and daily necessities sat untouched. Detectives called the scene highly alarming, making it incredibly obvious she didn't just walk out the door willingly. Plus, the physical evidence processed from the area was completely undeniable. Police found crimson droplets on the front steps, which labs matched straight to Nancy Guthrie. Someone definitely forced her from that residence. On February 2nd, 2026, Puma County officials told the press this was no longer a simple runaway situation. It was now a full-blown criminal probe. The feds were already boots on the ground. That peaceful Catalina foothills community, practically dead silent during January 31st, transformed into a massive crime hub buzzing with field agents, local media trucks, and a single prime suspect anchoring the entire case. An empty driveway and a shutting garage at 9:50 p.m. A guy sitting inside, waiting for the door to seal before rolling out. That disguised creeper caught on video is merely a fraction of the puzzle. That calculated Wi-Fi crash is another clue. Yet neither fact clarifies what a veteran 30-year federal profiler deduced while analyzing 6 clips of a supposedly mourning daughter. Nor do they explain the motive. Look, despite Savannah speaking to the media constantly and Annie staying totally quiet, nobody ever publicly mentioned retrieving Tomaso's vehicle from the police impound. I'm dropping 7 rock-solid, fully documented facts next. Once we hit number 7, that federal agent's primetime TV theory won't sound like crazy guesswork anymore. It'll honestly seem like the sole logical conclusion of a massive 40-day manhunt. The bay sealed shut right around 9:30 p.m. That Saturday, January 31st, 2026, Tomaso Chioni sped off into the blackness. Over the subsequent 4 hours and 17 minutes, literally 0 working lenses caught an ounce of proof regarding what went down inside that Catalina foothills brick property. Suddenly, exactly at 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, Nancy's Google Nest lens caught a figure shifting on her porch. Then it just died. This wasn't a dead battery or a glitch. An actual person manually unplugged the hardware on purpose. Pulling that plug kicked off a brutal 40-day scramble for cops trying to piece the timeline back together. The video from that specific device shouldn't even be around today. Nancy definitely wasn't paying for ongoing cloud storage on her smart home setup. Without that remote-saving feature, clips vanish instantly when the power gets cut. However, federal hackers teamed up with Google engineers and burned 11 days hunting through deep-level server codes. They dug into hidden temporary files most everyday users never even notice. And they struck absolute gold. They extracted a half-dozen snapshots and 3 brief clips directly out of deep storage systems the intruder completely overlooked. Bureau Chief Kash Patel announced the find on February 12, 2026. 11 brutal days of cyber digging to rip clips off a device the culprit truly believed was dead forever. The video finally provided detectives with a solid glimpse of the suspect they desperately wanted to catch. Wearing all black, a man in dark gloves and sneakers walks directly up to NY's entryway. His features are hidden behind a dark balaclava. The eye and mouth holes show up as faint glowing spots under the security system's night vision sensor. He carries a dark 25-liter Ozark Trail camping bag. Since only Walmart carries this specific item, federal agents quickly singled it out as a massive clue for their inquiry. His build looks fairly average. Video specialists estimate he stands somewhere between 5'9" and 5'10". Furthermore, the slow, calculated way he strolls toward the lens told profilers that this was absolutely not some random, spur-of-the-moment act. Reaching into the yard, he grabs a handful of leaves to blind the camera before completely ripping the system offline. Everything feels incredibly orchestrated. Yet the tape also reveals another crucial detail. A distinct shape bulging from his jacket pouch. Ex-police experts reviewing the tape noted that the item closely resembled a walkie-talkie or perhaps a wireless jamming gadget. This specific observation quickly morphed into the biggest point of contention among specialists working the mystery. This mattered because, over the following week, Federal agents canvassed the entire block to ask residents one very particular thing. They wanted to know if anyone experienced sudden Wi-Fi dropouts late on the night of January 31st. Everyone gave the exact same response. Several homeowners reported losing web access during those late-night hours. A nearby resident mentioned his doorbell cam had a weird blackout right around the time NY vanished, displaying an error message instead of video. Coincidentally, that specific lens offered the clearest view of her home, angled perfectly to look right through the fence into her backyard. These synchronized recording failures sparked a massive technical hypothesis that instantly dominated both police chatter and mainstream media headlines nationwide. An illegal wireless jamming tool which violates federal communication laws could realistically, if dropped close enough to a network router, overload the local frequencies and block smart security systems from uploading or saving data. Detectives confirmed they were heavily exploring this angle. Sheriff Chris Nanos addressed the media, assuring folks that his deputies were chasing down every potential reason for the blackout. Authorities even pointed out a smashed electrical panel just down the street from NY's residence as a critical piece of the ongoing puzzle. Busted telecommunications gear definitely hints at someone intentionally trying to kill the neighborhood's internet. Yet tech specialists remained fiercely divided. Cybersecurity expert Morgan Wright explained to Fox News Digital that a basic, store-bought signal blocker usually only covers about 10 to 30 yards. He noted that knocking out internet access for multiple houses simultaneously would require massively powerful hardware running on a much grander scale. He also brought up a fantastic point. The video pulled from NY's personal front door system was crystal clear, showing absolutely zero distortion. If a running jammer had been sitting right on her porch during the event, it almost certainly would have scrambled or completely destroyed that file. Former Detective Lisa Miller argued that the mystery lump in the attacker's coat looked way more like a two-way radio than any sort of tech jammer, which naturally makes you wonder if the culprit was actively talking to an accomplice stationed nearby while the crime happened. The idea of a getaway driver or partner has actually been floating around detective circles since the very first week. One thing is absolutely certain, though: the disguised prowler standing outside NY's home had done his homework beforehand. CNN insiders revealed that task force members found definitive proof of the suspect scouting the house on an entirely different day. Previous footage shows no bag, but identical footsteps to the entrance. Serious scouting. A careful rehearsal pulled off long before he actually struck. Meanwhile, the massive big box retailer complied with police warrants, handing over months of sales data for every single one of those specific camping bags bought across their entire franchise. Sheriff Nanos told reporters that detectives were combing through hours of store security tapes to track down any matching buyers. He called the rucksack their strongest tangible piece of evidence yet. Take a moment to really look at the terrifying narrative all these clues form. A disguised intruder shows up at an 84-year-old grandmother's house dead in the middle of the night, knowing exactly where he's going. He spots the security setup immediately, armed with a handful of leaves to blind the system before cutting power. The guy might be packing hardware meant to scramble regional internet signals, especially given the wrecked electrical junction down the block. Nearby security cameras display blank spots in their archives during that exact same time frame. Federal agents burned 11 whole days dragging hidden video files out of a cloud database the attacker assumed was wiped. The recovered media paints a terrifying portrait of a guy who anticipated every single hurdle. Nothing about this was a random break-in. It was a highly coordinated strike. That's why detectives haven't just been trying to unmask this ghost since the early morning hours of February 1st. They are desperately hunting for the inside source who fed him the necessary blueprints, who possessed such intimate knowledge of the block to navigate its security webs, who tracked this lady's daily routine perfectly enough to nail the timing, who studied the layout enough to march right up to the porch blindfolded. Those clues absolutely scream that this was someone in her inner circle. All major manhunts kick off by asking a single, fundamental thing, not some crazy high-level theory. Just the most basic puzzle piece imaginable. Figuring out who laid eyes on the target last is not about pointing fingers. It is just standard protocol. That initial step happens across the board whenever somebody vanishes. Whether you are dealing with a tiny local precinct or elite FBI agents, when looking into how Nancy Guthrie vanished, investigators have gotten the exact same response starting on the morning of February 1st. 2026. The guy is Tomaso Chioni, Annie Guthrie's spouse, Savannah's brother by marriage, and a sixth-grade science instructor over at Basis Oro Valley School in Tucson. From the outside, he seemed perfectly normal, just a loving relative dropping his aging mother-in-law off following their evening meal. Nobody has altered that fact whatsoever, even after more than 40 days of heavy federal scrutiny. Even so, authorities kept his automobile locked in an impound yard for well past 40 days. Here is the established timeline. A rideshare dropped Nancy off right around 5:32 p.m. on Saturday, January 31st, 2026. They ate, chilled, and seemed completely normal. Around 9:45 p.m., Tommaso drove Nancy back in his blue Honda CR-V, taking a 10-minute cruise through the quiet Catalina foothills. Speaking with the New York Times, Sheriff Chris Nanos verified that Tommaso waited until Nancy got securely indoors prior to taking off. Her garage shut at 9:30 p.m. Tommaso peeled out, and things ended there. It remains the final proven social contact Nancy Guthrie experienced right before getting snatched from her residence during the pre-dawn stretch of February 1st. Let us look at what Tommaso understood right then. While parked in the driveway observing the shutter go down, he was totally familiar with the property's floor plan. The guy had visited the place a million times before. He was fully aware of where the surveillance lenses were mounted and completely understood Nancy's physical struggles. He knew all about her heart monitor and her exact daily pill routine. He understood exactly how much time would roll by before another person dropped by to visit her. Just having those facts does not automatically prove someone committed a crime. Pretty much everybody in Nancy's inner circle possessed similar details. However, looking at how detectives build a case, whoever spotted the target last holds a truly unique spot. That individual stuck around while the rest of the world was absent. Those folks hold details nobody else can access. For this specific situation, Tomaso Chioni is the only guy holding those cards. On February 3rd, 2026, journalist Ashley Banfield dropped a massive bombshell on her Drop Dead Serious audio show. She quoted a respected police insider tied to the probe, claiming detectives locked onto Tommaso as their primary suspect. Major news outlets picked up the story instantly. Later that same afternoon, Sheriff Chris Nanos fired back, claiming detectives still had not zeroed in on any suspects whatsoever. The police chief strongly and completely rejected Banfield's claims. Meanwhile, based on what Meghan Kelly uncovered, Savannah Guthrie was reportedly absolutely furious about it. Several insiders noted that she absolutely refuses to point fingers at her relative, seeing all the online chatter targeting him as incredibly harmful and irresponsible. That remains Savannah's official stance on the matter. Keep that thought handy, because if you look at the actual police record, it heads down a completely different path from their public talks. That blue Honda CR-V Tommaso drove to drop Nancy off on the evening of January 31st, ended up getting confiscated by the Puma County Sheriff's Department for their investigation. Cops towed the ride to gather physical clues, grab fingerprints, secure DNA samples, and pull digital records. Today's cars track way more information than drivers guess. They log speeds, location times, when doors open, and essentially stamp a clock on every little system function. Detectives confirmed they brought the ride in for a massive top-to-bottom teardown. Word eventually broke that the automobile sat at a mechanic under police watch, getting put back together piece by piece after the tech teams finished tearing it apart. While standing behind a microphone on February 16, 2026, Sheriff Nanos explicitly referred to the cars as having already been processed, totally wrapped up and returned. Yet 10 days later, on February 26th, CBS 5 reporter Briana Whitney pressed the department about the ride. Their answer left absolutely zero room for confusion. They claimed the only thing they could share was that the vehicle remained an active piece of their investigation. They said it was completely cleared on day 16, but later confirmed they still held it hostage on day 27. Law enforcement refused to clear up that mixed messaging. They stayed quiet during follow-up briefings and never dropped a single memo. Fast forward to February 27th. Ex-FBI agent Maureen O'Connell hopped onto Meghan Kelly's broadcast and delivered a pretty blunt assessment. Cops do not keep a ride locked up unless they think it holds major weight for a future trial, meaning there is zero chance they hold a relative's wheels for over a month just to follow standard protocol. Then, ex-FBI behavioral expert and Unabomber profiler James Fitzgerald dropped a quote that the country literally cannot stop talking about. He did not mince his words. He basically argued any completely innocent guy would have lawyered up to demand his car back. Yet Tommaso never actually went on record asking for it. Annie kept completely quiet about it too. Fast forward to March 11th, 2026. The Puma County cops admitted the ride was still locked up, claiming they were working on returning it. But they refused to give a hard date. Now, compare all of that madness to this. Take Luke Daly, the guy whose spot got completely swarmed by federal agents in heavy tactical gear on February 13th, 2026. That massive operation ended with him getting his wheels back in just about 2 weeks. Exact same probe run by the identical police force. The dude facing the craziest raid in the whole timeline got his ride back way quicker than the relatives the chief publicly declared innocent. Nobody in charge has bothered clearing up that weirdness. Where are you tuning in from tonight? Hit the comments right now with your hometown, your nation, and your current time zone. While you type that out, answer me this. Do you honestly think the timeline with that automobile makes any sense at all? Because the chief claimed it was totally finished, even though the ride was actively gathering dust in his squad's own lot. Go ahead and sound off below. I literally read every single response. Also, Savannah Guthrie is currently staying out in Tucson, and she sees Annie all the time. Plus, she is fully aware if the vehicle returned. She understands precisely the duration it remained missing. She heard Fitzgerald's national broadcast explaining the implications of failing to request the return of your automobile. Despite standing before reporters weekly since February 1st, she continues ignoring these specific facts in her statements. Naturally, the glaring quietness coming from the two siblings definitely catches everyone's attention. Furthermore, the behavioral expert spotting this pattern happens to be a guy who dedicated 30 years to decoding unspoken words. Up next, we uncover the proof federal agents pulled directly from Annie and Tommaso's residence during 2 separate sweeps within a 4-day window. Moreover, the gear authorities carried during that follow-up trip completely shifts the significance of every point we previously covered. It was February 4th, 2026. Exactly 3 days following Nancy Guthrie's disappearance from her Catalina Foothills brick property. Detectives arrived at a private property located roughly 4 miles away from Nancy's residence. They bypassed warehouses, storage facilities, and businesses. Instead, they targeted the personal dwelling belonging to Annie Guthrie and Tomaso Chioni. This was the exact place Nancy ate supper on January 31st. It is also where Tommaso departed around 9:45 at night, right before taking Nancy back to her place forever. 3 days following the incident, officers wearing protective hand gear roamed the property, snapping pictures of all the rooms, countertops, and hidden nooks that marked their initial sweep. Another walkthrough happened 4 days afterward. Before diving deeper, let us examine the crucial legal context surrounding these specific events. Authorities performed both inspections of Annie and Tommaso's property purely through voluntary agreement. During each visit, Annie and Tommaso willingly allowed the detectives inside without requiring any judicial orders. Lawyer Jennifer Coffindaffer, an ex-federal agent who previously served on tactical response units, publicly shared a crucial analysis regarding this situation's actual significance. Relying strictly on voluntary access implies detectives lacked sufficient evidence to establish reasonable suspicion. Had strong evidence existed, detectives definitely would secure judicial authorization. Instead, the team simply requested verbal approval. Coffindaffer officially clarified her belief that neither Annie nor Tommaso are actual targets, noting that inspecting properties linked to close relatives remains standard procedure during any major kidnapping investigation. This specific opposing viewpoint holds merit. The logic is sound and carries weight. However, events during that second evening sweep clearly exceeded typical procedures, a fact several retired police experts openly highlighted in the media. On Saturday, February 7th, 2026, the 7th investigative day, detectives reached Annie and Tommaso's place past dark. They stuck around for almost 3 hours, ultimately leaving before 12. Standing beyond the property lines, field journalists actively tracking the story, such as Fox News reporter Sarah Rump Whitten and News Nation's Brian Enton, recorded the entire inspection live. Bright camera bursts could be seen outdoors shining through the glass. Detectives were continuously snapping pictures of various living spaces and countless countertops. As officers finally exited the residence, they sported blue protective handwear while hauling out standard brown paper sacks. Ex-intelligence and federal investigator Tracy Walder verified in an interview with People magazine that those brown sacks caught on camera outdoors are typical collection pouches, while the pale box hauled by an official perfectly matched standard forensic gathering equipment. Then the credential caught everyone's eye. TMZ reporters working the area that night snapped pictures of a detective sporting an emblem linking him to the Internet Crimes Against Children Division, known as the ICAC. This specific clue instantly sparked major interest among retired police experts. These ICAC specialists primarily focus on tech abuse, dark web syndicates, and electronic data gathering. Spotting them at a domestic residence during an abduction inquiry drove both detectives and commentators to ask a single, crucial thing. What type of electronic proof were they hunting? The solution to that mystery seemingly dangled inside a box slung across an officer's back. TMZ reporters recognized the gear as matching the description of a Cellebrite universal digital retrieval machine. Veteran police commentators verified the machine's capabilities. It pulls information straight off cell phones, iPads, laptops, and memory chips, capturing even materials that people erased, locked behind passwords, or purposefully hid. Phone records, typed conversations, GPS tracking, app usage. Pictures essentially details the average person assumes vanish forever the second they hit delete. This advanced Cellebrite tech easily bypasses those removals to recover everything previously stored on the hardware. Authorities did not merely physically sweep the property, they basically downloaded the electronic footprint of all the gadgets found indoors. Now we arrive at the crucial point that retired federal investigator Brianna Fox brought up openly shortly after the follow-up raid. Showing up post-sunset but prior to the stroke of 12 perfectly aligns with the standard application of luminol. This special reactive liquid helps crime scene experts spot microscopic drops of bodily fluids that regular human vision cannot normally detect. Substances that somebody might have scrubbed away, covered with primer, or otherwise intentionally masked. This glowing compound requires a single, absolutely essential condition to work properly. It demands pitch-black surroundings. The detectives showed up post-dusk. They departed prior to 12. They remained indoors for 3 hours. Fox approached her media commentary cautiously. She mentioned that drawing wild conclusions based purely on the clock would be a mistake. She pointed out how federal agents routinely snap pictures of everything, explaining that meticulous gathering methods aim to clear up uncertainty rather than automatically point fingers. However, she agreed the schedule matched up perfectly with that chemical testing. The events that unfolded the following dawn introduce a completely new twist. Drone video from February 8, 2026, caught detectives searching NY's property, prodding the backyard septic tank with giant metal rods. They also inspected a sewer grate on site. Fox 10 Phoenix noted this marked a massive shift for detectives, pivoting from basic sweeps to hyper-focused forensic searches of exact spots in the yard. Reuters also caught wind of some brewing friction between national agents and the local police force. The Fed specifically requested that crucial items gathered from the crime scene, such as genetic material and a glove discovered close to NY's residence, get shipped out to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia, for deep testing. Finding that glove right outside the house gave them a massive clue. Quantico handles the absolute most delicate and intricate crime lab work in America, meaning shipping items there is far from your everyday procedure. This strongly suggests the items picked up at the location needed high-tech analysis well beyond the capabilities of the local cops. Once detectives finally wrapped up their twin sweeps of Annie and Tommaso's place, and once all the property bags were tagged and the Cellebrite downloads finished, the task force found themselves staring down monitors packed with retrieved digital footprints, scrubbed phone logs, wiped texts, GPS pings, and app usage all helped paint a virtual timeline of the critical window around January 31st. Though authorities have kept those exact findings under wraps. However, Federal agents do not drag a data cloning machine into a mourning household twice in 4 days just to check a box. The official timeline outlines a pair of voluntary sweeps over 4 days, complete with an online child exploitation specialist present. They brought in tech specifically designed to rip erased files straight from any gadget inside the residence. Showing up after sunset strongly points to luminol testing, followed by gloved cops carrying out bags of clues. Genetic samples headed to Virginia, and NY's waste tank getting searched with metal rods at dawn. That perfectly sums up 48 hours of aggressive gathering in this case. And absolutely none of it took place without context. All this went down while Savannah Guthrie faced the press, pleading with the public and carefully picking her phrases like a media veteran who knows the true power of language. The hidden meaning behind her speech, plus the 17 days spanning her February 7th address and her February 24th interview, gives behavioral experts incredible insight into the puzzle, completely shifting how we view the clues pulled from that residence. On February 16th, 2026, a full 2 weeks since Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her Catalina Foothills property, Sheriff Chris Nanos walked up to the mic and delivered a crystal-clear public message. He claimed the relatives were no longer suspects. Carefully selecting his terminology regarding the cars linked to the case, he called them processed cars, a past-tense phrasing suggesting everything was finished, completely wrapped up, and already returned to the owners. America tuned in. Major networks ran the story. Yet the blue Honda CR-V Tomaso Chioni drove to take Nancy Guthrie back on January 31st, remained parked in a police impound. It had not budged an inch. 10 days post-briefing. On February 26, 2026, CBS 5 journalist Briana Whitney reached out directly to Pima County authorities with a single inquiry. She wanted to know exactly where the car stood, and the precinct gave her a crystal-clear reply. They noted the ride remained an active part of the case. Cleared on day 16, yet the car was confirmed still impounded on day 27. Police never clarified why that discrepancy existed, offering zero explanations during future media briefings or official press releases. Everyone fixated on the phrase processed, all while the SUV gathered dust under heavy police guard. Fast forward to March 10th, 2026, and journalist Dave Mack shared on Nancy Grace's podcast that the Honda CR-V was sitting at a body shop. It was still under Pima County police control, not with the Guthries, and crews were actively putting it back together following an intense physical teardown. Detectives literally dismantled the ride, peeling back every interior panel and checking every single storage spot before they even thought about rebuilding it. By March 11th, 2026, Pima County authorities verified to Parade magazine that they still had not released the SUV. A police rep mentioned the evaluation was still in progress and refused to give any specific date for giving it back. Ex-Pima County SWAT Chief Bob Crigier chatted directly with Parade, breaking down the sheer volume of clues, techs likely pulled from the ride. They likely pulled prints and genetic swabs from absolutely every single surface, inside and out. Then comes the digital trail most people totally ignore. Modern cars are so much more than basic machines. They act as rolling hard drives, tracking GPS routes, miles per hour logs, door open alerts, and exact timing details for basically everything the vehicle did or everywhere it drove. Every single acceleration matches a clock punch. Crigier pointed out how cops could line up those numbers right against the January 31st timeline, second by second. He also brought up a theory that former FBI operative Jennifer Coffindaffer later elaborated on during her public appearances. Authorities might not have kept the vehicle just for the interior clues. They could have impounded it to figure out what occurred near its exterior. During her News Nation spot and on her personal YouTube vlog, Coffindaffer broke down exactly what detectives were likely wondering from day one. Could someone have tailed Nancy straight from Annie and Tommaso's place? Did a suspect hide a tracking bug somewhere on that SUV? Was there a chance an outsider messed with the ride either right before or after January 31st, dropping physical clues in the process? Coffindaffer made it crystal clear she does not view Annie or Tommaso as targets, highlighting their total willingness to let cops search the property twice as proof. Law enforcement asked for consent rather than executing a search warrant, which clearly indicates they lacked the legal backing to force their way in. We have to include that legitimate, fully verified rebuttal right here, as it adds crucial context to the whole picture. Still, consider the remarks made by ex-federal agent Maureen O'Connell while appearing on the Meghan Kelly broadcast this past February 27, 2026. Cops keep a car impounded strictly when it holds weight for future court proceedings. Standard protocol doesn't justify keeping a relative's ride locked up for more than 30 days. Later, former federal profiler James Fitzgerald dropped a carefully worded bombshell that has kept the whole country buzzing ever since. He noted that an innocent guy would have already lawyered up and demanded his wheels back, a step Tomaso Chioni simply hasn't taken in the public eye. Neither has Annie Guthrie, nor has Savannah Guthrie, who moved down to Tucson, hangs out with her sibling constantly, and has stayed rooted right there since the probe began. She is fully aware if that ride got returned. She grasps the exact length of its impoundment, and she definitely heard Fitzgerald's remarks broadcasted nationwide. She understands the public's perception of those comments. Yet week after week, she faces the press without acknowledging any of it. Contrast that behavior with one glaring parallel. Think about Luke Daley, the guy whose property was swarmed by a heavily armed federal strike team on February 13, 2026. Journalists at the scene witnessed a highly coordinated government raid, complete with armored transports and operators decked out in tactical armor. Yet, authorities handed Luke Daley's ride back in roughly 14 days, despite it being tied to the identical probe, the same local sheriff's office, and that exact federal inquiry. The suspect hit with the heaviest police raid got his wheels back quicker than the relatives whom the local sheriff openly labeled as innocent. Authorities haven't officially cleared up that weird inconsistency. We aren't just dealing with an isolated glitch here. We are watching a deliberate pattern unfold. Detectives spent more than 40 days literally tearing a vehicle apart and putting it back together, while officials released past-tense remarks that totally contradicted the ongoing situation. The crime scene techs went way past standard sweeps, ripping into doors, tearing through computer modules, and scrubbing every inch that could hide a print. They scoured for threads, DNA scraps, or GPS pings tying a person to a certain spot on the evening of January 31st. Yet the relatives haven't demanded their property back in over 40 days. Ex-tactical unit leader Crigier gave the absolute bluntest breakdown of how these clues add up from a detective's perspective. A detective's main goal is building a bulletproof prosecution that eliminates practically any hesitation for the folks sitting in the jury box. Securing an unbroken evidence trail is crucial to that mission. He deliberately mentioned a jury to explain the exact legal strategy keeping that ride locked up. That thing parked in the police yard, currently getting scoured and bolted back together, is way more than mere transportation. It serves as a 40-day biological logbook detailing every single route it took, every stop it made, and the identity of anyone who laid hands on it. Look, once the cops wrap up, secure the evidence trail, and crunch all the data, the car's secrets will finally shut down or blow open a mystery lingering since 9:30 in the evening on January 31st, 2026. Savannah Guthrie's televised remarks from February 7th through February 24th paint a revealing picture, and an expert profiler caught subtext that completely flew over the public's head. We are talking half a dozen on-screen interviews spread out over 31 days falling on February 4th, 7th, 9th, 14th, 24th, and March 2nd, 2026, alongside a $1 million bounty drop. They handed over $500,000 straight to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. She dropped social media updates every week and did press hits, aiming her pleas purposely at the exact individual who snatched Nancy Guthrie. Savannah Guthrie bared her absolute heartbreak for the whole country to witness, pausing her news anchor gig and walking right away from NBC's broadcasts of the 2026 Winter Games, relocating entirely to Tucson. She faced the media weekly, convinced or needing us to think that staying in the spotlight was her strongest remaining weapon. Pay close attention to her actual phrasing, since a seasoned psychological expert parses trauma totally differently than the average viewer. On February 4th, 2026, just 3 days after Nancy disappeared. Savannah stepped up to the mic with Annie and Cameron by her side. With all three kids united on screen, their word choice felt incredibly calculated and precise as they addressed the rumors of an extortion note leaking to the press. Looking straight at the culprit, they made it crystal clear that the relatives were fully prepared to negotiate. Savannah then threw in a major condition, insisting they required undeniable proof of life and captivity before the dialogue could move forward. That phrasing was surgical. It wasn't the messy rambling of a person paralyzed by trauma, but rather the highly scripted delivery of someone executing police advice during an active hostage crisis. By February 5th, 2026, Cameron Guthrie took the stage solo, speaking right to the abductor to confirm they hadn't received any secret messages and were still standing by for a call. He urged the suspect to make contact, stressing their desperate need for a dialogue channel, phrasing it as, "We haven't received word from you, and we need you to connect," essentially announced to the world that by February 5th, absolutely no secure back channel existed with Nancy's captor. Fast forward to February 7th, 2026, and the trio is back holding hands. But their messaging takes a massive detour. Staring dead into the lens, Savannah states firmly, "Your note arrived, and we completely grasp your demands. We are pleading with you to bring our mom home. Her safe return means everything, and we will gladly hand over the cash." Just 3 days prior, they demanded a hostage verification before negotiating. Yet by February 7th, they openly admitted to getting the extortion demands and promised to foot the bill. That dramatic pivot between press conferences highlights a major breakthrough in the extortion talks taking place right between the 4th and 7th of February. An insider tied to the case confirmed the note they mentioned was the exact same blackmail letter that federal agents and local deputies were already scrutinizing. Most importantly, the extortion threat forwarded to local CNN stations KLD and KGUN laid out a strict February 9th cutoff for a massive $6 million in Bitcoin. Let's examine that February 7th declaration again, focusing strictly on the wording. Offering cash is an immediate, absolute promise aimed straight at the person keeping Nancy captive. These aren't words of mourning or sorrow. These phrases are specifically designed to negotiate a hostage release. Furthermore, Annie happens to be right there next to Savannah during that exact speech. The trio of kids shared one clear demand: return Nancy and get paid. This was February 9th, 2026. Once that initial cutoff expires, Savannah steps in front of the camera by herself. Annie and Cameron are absent. The tone shifts dramatically. She informs everyone that she thinks her mom remains alive, adding that her relatives are completely frantic. She begs the community to alert the police right away if they spotted or caught wind of anything out of the ordinary. Her target demographic widened significantly. She stopped talking solely to the individual who snatched Nancy. Now, she's addressing the whole nation. The strategy pivoted away from a private hostage negotiation toward a massive community plea. Please keep coming on February 14th and February 18th. Her vocabulary stays relentlessly proactive, using phrases about hoping, looking, and pleading. Everything is phrased as if it's happening right now. Her loved ones still assume Nancy is alive, and her captor might listen. Fast forward to February 24th, 2026. 17 days following that initial cash offer, Savannah is flying solo once more. Neither Annie nor Cameron show up. Furthermore, the things she says sound absolutely nothing like her past 5 statement. She claims her relatives are still praying for a divine intervention, holding on to whatever optimism is left. Quoting her sibling, she mentions Annie talked about trying to keep the tiny sparks of optimism alive. Then comes the bombshell: maybe she passed away. She suggests her mom might have already joined the creator she worships, happily celebrating up in paradise alongside her parents, her sweet sibling Pierce, and their own father. Let that sink in. A cash offer on February 7th turns into accepting her death by February 24th. These definitely aren't just different spins on one idea. These represent completely different speaking styles, separated by a mere 17 days. The initial tactic uses aggressive, right-now vocabulary aimed at the abductor, built totally on the idea that Nancy is breathing and can be saved. That latter approach signals mourning and closure. painting a picture of an afterlife family gathering while admitting Nancy might actually be dead. Those two angles don't share the same psychological tone, nor do they carry the same underlying purpose. Plus, absolutely nothing was officially reported between February 7th and February 24th that would justify such a massive shift in Savannah's perspective. An ex-FBI expert from CNN brought up an interesting detail, making that February 7th cash promise openly on Instagram. Instead of using some secret network, strongly suggests that, back then, they still hadn't set up any hidden, direct contact with the culprit. Had a secure line existed, they would have negotiated confidentially instead of blasting it out to millions. That implies the abductor was streaming all of Savannah's clips on the exact same platforms as the general public. Each phrase, every subtle inflection, and all her visual setups were carefully crafted while fully aware that Nancy's captor was tuning in. Furthermore, an underlying clue remains hidden right beneath the surface, and it really hasn't gotten enough spotlight. During all of those media spots, Savannah was actually staying out in Tucson, meaning she hung out with Annie constantly. She saw exactly what the federal agents carried out of Annie's place in those paper collection sacks. She realized the vehicle remained impounded. She understood exactly what the detectives were focusing on. Thus, everything she said on tape was filtered through that heavy, looming awareness. When psychology experts dive into these types of recording sequences, this is exactly what they analyze. These professionals never simply listen to the audio. They pay close attention to who shows up on screen and who stays hidden. Experts track exactly when the phrasing pivots, comparing it to whatever updates hit the police file right before that sudden change occurred. They focus on the disconnect between outward facade and secret awareness, lined up together. Those half-dozen clips reveal something the public listened to but failed to grasp. Savannah Guthrie is far more than a heartbroken kid begging for help. She's actually an incredibly polished media veteran, highly educated in selecting her phrasing carefully, spending 31 days in front of the lens, keeping massive secrets to herself. Everything this section has been leading up to is exactly what that seasoned expert caught after reviewing the complete set of tapes. The very next move he made, posing a specific question on live television following that final clip, totally changes the entire perspective of this case. February 4th, 2026. Annie Guthrie takes a seat next to her siblings on the broadcast. She shows up, talks, and grips Savannah's fingers. 3 days following her mom's disappearance from a masonry home 4 miles away from Annie's own porch, she looks into the lens, joining the initial community cry for help. 4 days down the line, on February 7th, she returns. She stands next to Savannah, locking fingers, totally visible for that massive cash offer broadcast across America. Then, Annie Guthrie drops completely off the map for 22 straight days. It wasn't some quick break. It was a full 22 days of silence, while federal agents raided her house twice in just a 4-day span. As the forensic tool pulled data from all the electronics inside her residence, as the vehicle remained impounded, the whole nation held its breath, and hotline operators fielded more than 30,000 tips. During this entire period, Annie Guthrie stayed totally quiet. She released absolutely zero statements, avoided the press completely, and stayed off social media. That is 22 straight days without a peep. Keep in mind, Tomaso Chioni was the final individual spotted with Nancy before she vanished. Her final stop that evening, right before heading back to her own place, was actually Annie's residence. Yet the figure linking these two crucial details kept her mouth shut for 3 weeks, even as federal agents tore through her property, impounded her spouse's ride, and seized the electronics sitting right there in her kitchen. Before diving into what that quietness means, we really need to lay out the fair, valid reasons behind it right up front. First off, Annie Guthrie avoids fame. For her entire adult life, she has purposefully stayed well away from the public eye. Working as a writer, she intentionally keeps things incredibly low-key alongside Tommaso, an Italian-born musician and educator. Preferring total privacy, she lacks any PR background, possesses no massive following, and totally lacks experience dealing with flashing bulbs or crowded news briefings. Savannah thrives in that environment, whereas Annie simply doesn't. Plus, During major federal probes, defense attorneys always give relatives tied to an ongoing situation incredibly clear-cut advice on how to act. Keep your mouth shut. Let the authorities handle their jobs. And absolutely refuse to offer quotes that reporters might twist or weaponize later on. Assuming Annie got exactly that warning, which seems highly probable, then keeping quiet shouldn't raise any major red flags. It makes total logical sense. A good lawyer would demand exactly that approach. These are solid, confirmed facts, and they hold real weight here. However, experts profiling kidnapping situations specifically study what people aren't doing, paying just as much attention to missing reactions as they do to obvious ones. When seniors get snatched right out of their residences, especially if there are financial demands and real hope for a rescue, standard psychological profiles show that immediate relatives almost always transform into incredibly vocal, frontline campaigners. These family members organize media events, plead desperately on television, and even address the abductors personally whenever they get the chance. Staying in the spotlight feels like actually doing something when options are completely exhausted. Now, this isn't some unbreakable rule carved in stone. It is a widely recognized trend. And looking at this specific situation, we see one sister hitting every single mark perfectly. The other completely misses it. Remember, Savannah works in broadcasting, so she understands lighting, framing, and exactly how her phrasing comes across to audiences. That means she easily recognizes the difference between a genuinely moving display of sorrow and a performance that simply fails to connect. Therefore, those 6 interviews aren't merely raw sadness. Every single one was carefully planned, highly intentional, and brilliantly put together. I am not criticizing her at all. It just highlights someone keeping their cool and managing an absolute nightmare beautifully. Yet it also suggests that comparing those 6 emotional pleas from Savannah to Annie's 22 silent days highlights way more than just differing character traits. You are actually observing a conscious decision from someone who realized the instant her mom officially vanished what the stakes truly were. She understood she wasn't merely a heartbroken kid anymore, but a key relative dealing with federal agents tossing her property 2 times within 4 short days. Finally, on March 2nd, 2026, Annie stepped back into the open, marking her initial appearance since February 7th. She showed up with both Savannah and Tommaso at a temporary memorial built right out front of the victim's residence. All 3 laid down some bright yellow blooms near the property line, and Savannah quickly shared a shot of it on her social media feed. Annie still refused to offer a single quote or speak to reporters, offering only her physical attendance while completely keeping her lips zipped. Right then, a major news crew managed to get video of the scene, showing those 3 relatives lingering side by side near the memorial. Over the next 7 days, internet sleuths and experts tore that specific video clip apart more than any other piece of evidence. Why? Because hanging out at the border of his missing mother-in-law's yard was Tomaso Chioni, the final guy confirmed to be with Nancy. This guy had his ride locked up in impound for more than 30 days, while cops ripped through his residence twice in 4 days using high-tech data rippers. He was lingering at a memorial for the missing woman he recently interacted with, alongside a spouse who stayed totally quiet for 22 days, and a sister-in-law who gave 6 perfectly crafted interviews over 31 days. Around March 10th, 2026, Annie showed up briefly at the house with Cameron, yet she continued completely dodging the press. She completely avoided the lenses, refusing to say a single word to the perpetrators, the nervous community, or even the detectives tearing her place apart. So how exactly do criminal profilers interpret 22 silent days from a daughter searching for her mom, dealing with federal raids, and married to the final guy spotted with the victim? Well, the smart move isn't automatically jumping to the conclusion that keeping quiet implies guilt. Instead, just like James Fitzgerald explained on cable news, professionals use that lack of communication as a critical data point, comparing it directly against the half-dozen broadcasts produced by a sibling sharing identical intelligence. Once you combine that behavioral puzzle with the vehicle's movement, the dual raids, and the digital sweep, it weaves a narrative that mainstream media touched on without ever fully connecting the dots. Hit the comments below immediately. Let me know your current location, what time your clock says, and how the skies look outside. Plus, answer me one very crucial question. After hearing all this, do those 22 mute days feel way more suspicious to you than they did 5 minutes ago? Stick around, because the next massive revelation completely blew the mind of a 30-year federal agent after he reviewed those 6 clips. Ultimately, it is the smoking gun, connecting a daughter's absolute quietness straight to her siblings' carefully chosen statements. They are both aiming right at the exact same target. Look closely, because that trajectory carries a specific title, 30 years. That represents the entire duration James Fitzgerald worked within the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Psychological Profiling Division. 3 decades sitting right where the most horrific crimes end up. We are talking about mysteries you cannot crack using DNA swabs or surveillance tapes. These are investigations blown wide open simply by decoding human psychology. It comes down to vocabulary choices, repeating habits, and those quiet gaps individuals build to protect themselves whenever the heat gets turned up. He is the exact operative who utilized language analysis to help bring down the Unabomber way back in the 1990s. He did not use genetic evidence, anonymous hotlines, or video recordings. Instead, he analyzed Ted Kaczynski's written document to spot exact grammatical quirks, revealing a very distinct psychological makeup. That identical analytical perspective is exactly what Fitzgerald applied while reviewing 6 video clips featuring a heartbroken child. Once he finished watching, his focus completely shifted away from the disguised guy caught on the porch recording. Alongside former Bureau operative Raymond Carr, he has openly dissected the Nancy Guthrie mystery via their Code Red audio show and various network television broadcasts. Since the beginning of February 2026, working as a team, the 2 experts pieced together a psychological framework for the unidentified intruder. This assessment pinpointed actions that Carr specifically characterized as being fueled by dark delusions. Carr deduced this individual likely spent hours scouring the web beforehand, studying techniques for bodily restraint and covert tracking. This is a person who undoubtedly rehearsed their approach several times, testing out pathways leading right up to the objective. Location prior to the evening of January 31st. They engaged in scouting that was hardly casual. It involved hands-on, continuous, and aggressive groundwork. This character sketch perfectly aligns with verified cable news network coverage, detailing the intruder's previous trip to the residence on a completely different day. Yet, during his public statements, Fitzgerald ignored the perpetrator's psychological makeup completely. He chose to zoom in on how the relatives were acting. During a February 27, 2026 interview on Meghan Kelly's program, he dropped a theory that instantly turned into the most dissected soundbite of the whole country's discourse regarding the mystery, directing his attention to the exact ride Tomaso Chioni utilized to transport Nancy back to her house late on January 31st. An automobile stuck inside the Pima County Sheriff's impound lot for more than 30 days. By that specific moment in time, Fitzgerald pulled no punches and chose his phrasing carefully. If I had absolutely nothing to hide, I would have retained an attorney already to demand my car returned. And then he took it up a notch, taking into account the 6 clips of Savannah alongside the relative's general media strategy. He openly wondered if she actually harbors secret doubts regarding her sibling, Annie. Just pause and consider the sheer nerve required to float that theory on a massive stage. We are not dealing with a random internet troll here. This is hardly some armchair detective throwing out wild guesses from their basement studio. You are listening to a professional who dedicated 30 years of his life to the Bureau's most elite psychological profiling division. He has stared down suspects inside, interviewing chambers the general public could not even imagine. His entire career legacy rests completely upon nailing these precise psychological evaluations. Yet, following his review of 6 recordings featuring a mourning child, the exact footage broadcast to the rest of America, his primary takeaway had absolutely nothing to do with the disguised figure outside the front door. Instead, it centered entirely on the complicated relationship connecting the 2 siblings. The former agent explicitly stated that he was not throwing around formal accusation. He was simply providing an academic breakdown based entirely on psychological clues spotted throughout all 6 broadcasts. He caught onto a disconnect, a glaring blind spot between Savannah's verified insider knowledge regarding Annie, her constant stay in Tucson during the inquiry, her front row seat to every single bureau maneuver 4 miles down the road, and the carefully curated narrative she actually shares with reporters. 6 interviews spanning 31 days. Every single syllable totally calculated. Yet, not once did she ever manage to bring up the automobile, the pair of property raids, the Celebrite digital scraping, or the massive pile of physical evidence cops dragged out of the residence. Plus, Fitzgerald is definitely not the only expert making these psychological reads. Retired bureau operative Mary Ellen O'Toole admitted to the cable news network that she was stunned when Pima County deputies openly confessed to lacking any persons of interest right at the start. She pushed the idea that keeping the heat cranked up on possible culprits is absolutely essential, explaining that backing off in the press basically gives suspects a free pass to chill out. Helping them avoid those sloppy psychological blunders, detectives eagerly wait for. O'Toole threw out another massive clue regarding the disguised intruder's mindset. She pointed out how effortlessly he adapted to sudden environment shifts, paying close attention to his reaction the exact second he spotted the recording device. That icy demeanor only stems from 2 origins. She noted a natural disposition and a whole lot of practice handling similar situations. Candace DeLong, another retired bureau expert, threw her own psychological diagnosis into the mix regarding the attacker. Chatting with the cable news network, DeLong painted a mental picture of the mastermind behind this operation, labeling them as ridiculously arrogant regarding their personal skill set. This is a guy who views himself as virtually bulletproof. His entire blueprint stemmed from icy precision rather than some panicked last resort. DeLong pointed out that feeling bold enough to pull off such a complicated gig, orchestrating a camera blackout while mapping out the terrain beforehand, and then dragging an 84-year-old lady from her house under the cover of darkness, requires a totally abnormal dose of sheer egotism. Taking this psychological breakdown right back to Fitzgerald's primary takeaway. Because putting together a job like this requires severe insider access, intimate details about the property, the exact routines, the security setups, and the precise time frame when Nancy was going to be completely isolated. You cannot just grab that kind of hardcore logistical intelligence off the internet. That data only flows from someone on the inside. So the nagging doubt gnawing at Fitzgerald after binging those 6 clips, the exact mystery he dragged into the national spotlight, focuses entirely on which close relative actually held those crucial keys, and whether Savannah Guthrie, facing the press every single week while carefully selecting each phrase with expert accuracy, they already have the solution. Fitzgerald additionally highlighted the psychological red flags detectives would be tracking in anybody closely tied to the investigation. Noticeable psychological stress affecting their rest habits, along with a habit of offering unprompted excuses or over-justifying their locations. Extreme paranoia regarding police presence, plus the very glaring failure to request back a vehicle that has remained parked inside a police impound lot for more than 40 days. He explained that the automobile fact remains crucial not as absolute proof, but because failing to ask for it reveals massive psychological insights to an expert studying the supposed owner's exact mindset. This remains an expert inquiry rather than a direct charge or final verdict, offering a psychological assessment through the absolute highest level of professional scrutiny utilized in this investigation. There are exactly 7 documented facts publicly available, with this specific point seamlessly connecting the remaining 6 components. Because Fitzgerald did not stumble upon this inquiry randomly, he reached this viewpoint by analyzing 6 separate clips and interpreting their underlying messaging, comparing the spoken words directly alongside the unspoken silence, then utilizing 30 years of psychological expertise to bridge the space dividing those 2 realities. The existing proof of prior planning, specifically the electronic footprint left months prior to January 31st, 2026 narrows that divide considerably. January 11th, 2026, exactly 3 weeks before Nancy Guthrie vanished from her Catalina Foothills property. Detectives analyzing the electronic history connected to the investigation eventually spotted apparent online inquiries targeting Nancy Guthrie's exact residential location, tracing back to an Arizona origin. The specific day of January 11th also emerged completely separately elsewhere. A notification shared on the neighborhood doorbell community platform on February 12th was officially verified as authentic by the Pima County Sheriff's Department. He explicitly asked residents to review their surveillance recordings taken between 9 p.m. and midnight on January 11th, spotting that exact day across a pair of distinct inquiry paths, both electronic history and a specific video inquiry, is hardly a random fluke. It serves as a factual marker nestled within an extensive trajectory of early planning, which started during the summer of 2025 rather than January. Journalists relying on open-source search metric information spotted likely online inquiries concerning Nancy Guthrie's Catalina Foothills property spanning from June 21st to the 28th of 2025, over 7 months prior to her abduction. Though a tech representative offered a specific warning regarding these discoveries, the analytics platform exists to interpret massive information chunks, meaning for highly obscure subjects. The system intentionally injects fabricated interference to shield individual confidentiality. Any sudden surge regarding a rare subject does not absolutely prove someone actually looked it up. An insider close to the probe informed reporters that police rely on legal warrants and official techniques to acquire legitimate browsing logs, rather than using accessible commercial metrics. The network's discovery provides a general compass rather than absolute proof. However, the reference timeline of January 11th holds undeniable certainty in a singular aspect. It perfectly matches the exact date detectives separately highlighted when requesting security recordings from Nancy's surrounding neighborhood. The media outlet additionally uncovered likely internet queries regarding Savannah Guthrie's personal income spanning from December 13th through the 20th of 2025. $6 million was the exact amount listed in the extortion letter mailed to local broadcasters KOLD and K-Gun, a link openly highlighted by retired federal behavioral expert Raymond Carr. Whoever mailed that threat clearly understood Savannah Guthrie's financial compensation, having thoroughly investigated the matter and finalized a specific dollar amount prior to ever mailing the message. Furthermore, that monetary figure was intentionally tailored to an amount someone with her prominent career status might realistically obtain or gather. Tangible proof of prior planning introduces a completely different dimension. As retired federal operative Jennifer Coffindaffer explained to journalists that the disguised intruder's actions captured by the recovered smart doorbell footage established a deep familiarity with the location far exceeding anything gathered through simple remote observation. They marched straight toward the lens with a hidden face, showing zero hesitation and never hunting for the hardware. They were perfectly aware of its placement, prompting Coffindaffer to bluntly state that a random, unplanned attack simply defies all logical reasoning here. The intruder certainly didn't just stumble upon the camera after arriving. They already recognized its location, prompting detectives to confirm exactly what that means regarding their prior property visits. This exact person approached Nancy's entryway during a different instance prior to January 31st, walking the identical route with that same deep locational awareness, albeit lacking a bag initially. Ex-federal operative Brianna Fox shared on national television that the perpetrator fits a distinct psychological profile, someone who planned ahead but failed to consider absolutely every angle, highlighting the visual contrast between the initially empty-handed visit versus the subsequent bag-carrying appearance. She evaluated that the individual psychologically displays massive arrogance, feeling wildly overconfident in their flawless scheme while accounting for the physical lens, yet entirely missing how cloud networks store lingering video even after hardware gets disabled. An electrical junction located just down the block from Nancy's residence introduced a tangible element into this electronic puzzle. The Pima County Sheriff's Department officially verified to several news agencies that a vandalized power cabinet situated near the victim's street remained a crucial piece of the ongoing probe. Sabotaging public utility equipment right near the intersection bordering the victim's actual house heavily suggests a deliberate effort to disrupt local communication networks, either leading up to or amid the crime itself. Detectives haven't openly stated if the perpetrator actually wrecked the equipment, yet its addition to the current pool of collected clues is firmly established and on record. Furthermore, federal involvement in the search stretched well past local city limits, with Sheriff Nanos telling the press that detectives were actively coordinating with law enforcement down in Mexico. This teamwork aligns perfectly with the actual layout of the area. Tucson is located roughly 60 miles straight up from the border with Mexico. Slap in the middle of that route is Rio Rico, the exact spot where authorities pulled over delivery worker Carlos Palazuel on February 10th before letting him go completely cleared. As the probe progressed, the Federal Bureau relocated their main headquarters out of Tucson and up into Phoenix. While officials called it a simple shuffling of assets, those Phoenix hubs actually pack way more investigative firepower and support capabilities compared to the smaller branches. Moving operations like that clearly shows the entire situation had outgrown its initial local boundaries. Federal agents also retrieved more pictures from a trio of security devices around NY's house, covering the swimming area, rear lawn, and side alley. Every single one of those lenses caught individuals hanging around the lawn at some undisclosed point prior to the kidnapping. Detectives stated that none of the visuals raised any immediate red flags, though the simple reality that the equipment was triggering, documenting individuals wandering through her lawn and the surrounding neighborhood leading up to January 31st, became a crucial piece of the official evidence file. Let us examine the entire calculated timeline. It starts with possible location inquiries during June 2025, possible income snooping in December 2025, a specific video inquiry for January 11th, 2026, someone physically scouting her entryway prior to the kidnapping, a broken electrical unit down the road, an extortion amount dialed into the exact financial bracket of Savannah's actual income, a scheme relying on a disguised person wearing hand protection, carrying a very particular bag, plus a strategy to blind the porch lens. The local sheriff shared a crucial detail with NBC Nightly News that flew completely under the radar. He noted detectives are confident they understand exactly why Nancy Guthrie's house got singled out. The official refused to name the source who leaked that crucial intelligence. He also kept quiet on whether those details were pulled from open databases or confidential files. He just confirmed they have a motive. But then he dropped another bomb, refusing to dismiss the chance of the culprit plotting a second attack. That remark from the Puma County top cop heading up the grassroots probe hits the hardest, basically hinting that the mastermind behind this whole thing might not be done yet. It suggests the sheer arrogance and extreme planning poured into January 31st was far from a random act of panic. Instead, it stemmed from a calculated system, a steady routine, and a well of victim intelligence that would not just vanish after one job. 7 confirmed facts, fully documented by authorities, piece together a timeline that clearly aims right at a singular conclusion when you line them up. The meaning behind that snapshot and the ultimate takeaway from 45 straight days of federal evidence gathering form the entire foundation for the closing segment of our broadcast tonight. Wednesday, March 18th, 2026, marks day 46. Nancy Guthrie remains gone for 46 days. 0 arrests, 0 suspects, 0 verified sightings. Federal agents and the Puma County hotlines have fielded past 18,000 leads around the clock, while a massive bounty between $1.2 and $2 million sits totally untouched. Local Puma County authorities even publicly stated as recently as March 13th that they are still actively combing through clues, testing forensic samples, reviewing video footage, and digging through cyber trails without setting any end date. The hunt continues. Nancy Guthrie remains lost. Plus, those 7 key facts we broke down over our previous 9 segments remain completely ignored by every single official speaking to the press. Let us look at the actual documented truth. Every single piece lined up together. Fact number 1 confirms Tomaso Chioni was the final individual to spot Nancy Guthrie breathing. He chauffeured her back from Annie's place late Saturday evening, January 31st, 2026. He literally saw her bay doors shut at 9:30 p.m. before pulling off. That specific narrative has stayed rock solid throughout 46 days of intense federal scrutiny. Sheriff Chris Nanos officially verified that Tommaso made absolutely sure Nancy was secure indoors before taking off. The leading officer also issued a highly public declaration officially ruling out the whole Guthrie family, meaning every brother, sister, and partner. He did not mince words. He emphasized the relatives have acted incredibly helpful and polite, labeling them as pure casualties here. That official vindication is permanently documented, That fact belongs here with everything else. Fact number 2. The local security feeds completely blacked out the evening Nancy disappeared. Various smart doorbells covering different houses logged bizarre missing chunks of footage falling perfectly into the overnight time frame of her kidnapping. Local deputies officially acknowledged that a busted electrical cabinet just down the block from NY's place tied directly into their ongoing probe. Tech specialists determined that causing that specific blackout took either military-level jamming gear or intentional sabotage of the neighborhood power grid. Federal authorities stamped both January 11th and January 24th as days where the suspect likely stalked the area beforehand. Detectives begged locals for video covering those exact days. The disguised culprit clearly scouted NY's house prior to January 31st. The whole thing was highly orchestrated. We are not just guessing here. That stands as the ultimate verified deduction reached by both Puma County deputies and federal agents. Sheriff Nanos backed it up for the press when he openly called the assault a highly focused hit. Fact 3. Federal agents swept Annie and Tommaso's house twice within 4 days. Specifically on February 4th and February 7th, that follow-up sweep went down completely at night. Investigators pulled up post-sundown and rolled out before midnight. That schedule perfectly matches specialized lab procedures needing pitch-black conditions to spot chemical traces. During that late-night trip, they hauled in high-tech cyber gear designed to rip scrubbed phone logs right out of a device. Investigators extracted texts, GPS tracking, and app usage from all interior electronics. Officials wearing blue latex gloves walked out hauling brown collection sacks. ex-CIA and FBI operative Tracy Walder verified that these sacks are typical protocol for gathering clues. They spotted an investigator specializing in online child exploitation at the scene. Plus, the property sweeps happened voluntarily. Lawyer Jennifer Coffindaffer leaned on this exact detail to back up her theory, clearing Annie and Tommaso from suspicion. Detectives would have secured a legal mandate had they possessed solid proof. That logical defense holds water completely. Point number 4. Authorities impounded the exact Honda CR-V that Tommaso utilized to transport Nancy back to her house. During a news briefing on February 16th, Sheriff Nanos specifically referred to examining the cars using the past tense. Fast forward to February 26th, and local law enforcement told CBS 5 the automobile remained a focal point, exonerated by day 16. Yet the automobile stayed impounded by day 27. By March 10th, specialists were actively dismantling the car, tearing off interior sections, scrutinizing all areas, and pulling digital footprints like GPS tracking, entry timings, along with velocity records. Retired federal investigator Maureen O'Connell openly mentioned that law enforcement only keeps automobiles impounded when they hold solid courtroom significance. Profiler James Fitzgerald openly noted how a blameless individual usually fights to get their ride returned immediately. Yet nobody asked for it. By March 11th, authorities made it clear they had absolutely no schedule for handing the automobile back over. Point number 5. Every single relative, which naturally covers both Annie and Tommaso, successfully cleared their lie detector screenings, verified through various insiders by March 17, 2026. This update stands as the single biggest piece of exonerating proof we have. While lie detector outcomes hold zero weight before a judge and hardly guarantee total honesty, running these tests reveals exactly where federal agents and local cops stand strategically. Yeah, they definitely took those exams and aced them. Furthermore, the head detective publicly exonerating the relatives wasn't just some offhand comment to reporters. That amounted to a calculated, official declaration explicitly meant to shut down rampant gossip sweeping across countrywide news outlets. Point number 6. The way Savannah spoke transformed drastically from February 7th to February 24th, catching the serious attention of psychological experts, going from offering ransom cash on February 7th to suggesting her sister might be dead by February 24th. Her vocabulary flipped from negotiating a payoff straight into mourning terminology over 17 days, without a single public breakthrough to justify the pivot. Meanwhile, Annie completely vanished from the media spotlight for 22 straight days, dodging cameras from February 7th until March 1st. Interestingly, Psychological profiles for kidnapped seniors usually dictate that relatives living nearest to the target end up being the loudest champions on television. Savannah fits that mold perfectly. Conversely, looking at the actual media footprint, Annie clearly bucks the trend. Having solid defense lawyers easily justifies her silence. Though, still, criminal profilers definitely flag the discrepancy. Point number 7. James Fitzgerald, who spent 30 years profiling for the feds and famously nailed the Unabomber using word analysis, reviewed half a dozen clips of the mourning relative. Once that final tape finished, he went on live network broadcasting and openly wondered if Savannah Guthrie was secretly harboring doubts regarding her sibling, Annie. The guy never pointed fingers directly. His takeaway was purely clinical, based entirely on the disconnect between Savannah's actual knowledge and the words she actually shared over 31 days of press events. Hearing that specific doubt from such a heavy hitter after deep vetting isn't just random chatter. That perspective represents the absolute highest tier of psychological insight we have gotten from anyone who isn't currently carrying a police badge. So, let us break down the big picture once you piece every single one of those 7 clues into a timeline. This looks like a hyper-focused hit, mapped out well in advance, and pulled off following serious staking out. We are tracking physical clues, shifting from the victim's doorstep straight to the son-in-law's property, over to the daughter's residence, and finally landing in a police yard where an SUV gathered dust for more than 40 days. There is a psychological roadmap transitioning from a half-dozen tapes of a crying child straight to a federal expert questioning the sibling who stayed totally mute for 3 entire weeks. Add in a detective hunt blowing up from Tucson all the way to Phoenix, tapping national agencies, and launching huge roadside ads stretching across Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California. They even partnered with officials south of the border, raking in 18,000 leads and putting up an untouched bounty of $1.2 million. Head lawman Nanos confidently mentioned to NBC that his squad is absolutely inching near to pinpointing a prime target. An expert in genetic family trees openly wagered that the perpetrator's biological material could potentially still be pulled from the house. On March 13th, Pima County authorities went on record stating their lab techs are constantly churning through fresh forensic samples. Federal highway signs are currently blazing across 7 metropolitan hubs. Yet, as of right now, March 18th, 2026, the handcuffs remain firmly locked away. Nancy Guthrie is a beloved mom and a cherished grandma. We are talking about a deeply religious 84-year-old lady who has gone 46 whole days missing her critical heart pills. That poor woman has every right to be located and brought back to her family safely. Should you possess a single shred of detail regarding this mystery, please ring the federal hotline by dialing 1-800-CALL-FBI. Folks can likewise drop leads securely over at tips.fbi.gov. Alternatively, the local sheriff's department desk sits at 520-35149. There is a massive $1.2 million pot waiting for whoever drops the clue that finds Nancy or locks up the culprit. Detectives literally read every single message. They run down every potential rabbit hole. Whatever small thing you know might just be the linchpin that cracks this wide open. Pass this along today. If we highlighted facts the mainstream news ignored, we aren't doing this just to boost views. We have to keep Nancy Guthrie's name relevant in the public eye until we bring her home safely. Each time you pass this around, we reach folks holding crucial clues that law enforcement hasn't stumbled upon yet. Join the community and tap that alert bell, because once things finally crack wide open, and believe me, they will crack open, we will be the earliest spot breaking down the complete evidence timeline, exactly like we did here. You definitely want to stick around for that. Drop a message below and let us know your location this evening. Let us know which fact shocked you the most and where you believe the evidence leads. I personally read everything below. Folks, Nancy Guthrie remains unfound on day 46. Police are actively searching, and the cash bounty sits waiting. Deep inside the proven facts we just broke down today, the actual truth is already sitting right there. Behind every missing poster is a life that once filled a room with laughter. Nancy Guthrie isn't just a headline or a 46-day-old case. She is an 84-year-old mother whose heartbeat depends on more than just a pacemaker. It depends on the truth. This tragedy serves as a haunting lesson. Our elders are our most precious, yet most vulnerable treasures. In a world obsessed with digital noise and social media feeds, we must never forget the quiet sanctity of those who raised us. When a matriarch vanishes, the silence left behind is deafening. It reminds us that vigilance is a debt we owe to our community. The Guthrie case reveals that justice cannot breathe in a vacuum of secrets, whether it is a neighbor's flickering Wi-Fi or a detail held quiet for 40 days. No observation is too small when a life is on the line. Silence is the shadow where injustice hides, but community courage is the light that cracks the darkness. Let this be our wake-up call. Look closer at your neighbors. Protect the fragile. Because a family's peace shouldn't be a bounty to be won, it is a human right. Speak up, stay vigilant, and never let a light go out without a fight.